We are recording. Go ahead, Gail.
Okay. Welcome. My name is Gail Santy. I am the director of the Central Kansas Library System. I am also the director of the Great Bend Public Library. I've been with the system for 13 years and just a director for the last 3 years. The previous 10 years, I worked as a consultant, and I have talked about strategic planning and long-range planning for many years. I have done 4 national presentations on the topic, and I'm going to share some things with you tonight. Some things will be earth-shaking, other things will not, but I want you to take away from this hour a solid confidence in knowing that it is the board's responsibilities to strategic plan. That happens best when it's done with the librarian. I'm going to give you some simple tools, and I'm going to give you some things to think about. I've got 2 of my colleagues with me tonight. Go ahead, ladies.
I'm Mary Beth Schaefer. I'm the assistant director and the continuing education consultant. I'm available to help with new director training. I can also come out with some trustee training and grant training, budget training, Kansas library law. We can help you with all of that.
That's right. That's right. Go ahead, Patty.
Good evening. I'm Patty Collins, and I am the Youth Services Consultant here at the Central Kansas Library System. And I take care of all of the fun stuff in our world, but I also, this is my 8th year of being a trustee trainer, so I'm quickly becoming up to speed on all things related to trustees, so don't hesitate to call on any of us if you have any questions at all.
And I think it's important to note that this is Patty's 8th year. And Patty, do you feel like you know it all yet?
That's the funniest thing I've ever heard. No, but I find that the little tip that I take away each time we do a training gets filed away in my little file box, and hopefully I'm able to bring it out at just the right time when someone has a question. So, but I know that I have my colleagues to rely on if I'm not sure what the answer is.
Exactly. That's how I feel too. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I've got a slideshow, lots of slides, but more talking than reading, just to keep me on track. We will have a section for questions and answers. I want to encourage you to either go ahead and unmute your mic and ask your question. Don't hesitate to interrupt me, or go ahead and type your question into the chat. If you'd like your question to remain anonymous, you can share that with just Patty or Mary Beth, and they'll read that out to me in the chat. Okay, let me get started. As I said, I've been doing this for a long time, and I'm excited to offer that to all of you. Planning is something that can be a little scary. It can feel like it's a huge task. It can feel like there are so many moving parts that you don't even know where to start. There are signs that you need a strategic plan, just in case you don't have one. For the librarian, everything on the to-do list is a top priority. I'm working with one board, and for an example, when they give their librarian directives, it just runs the gamut. It's so many different things that what's happening is they're really setting up the librarian for failure. They don't mean to. They want everything to happen, and they want everything to be great, but their mind's eye is way too big. They're going to need to narrow that down. You may be pursuing all the opportunities for fear that you'll miss the big one. You may be applying for grants left and right when you just need to apply for one to get things done. Here's a real big sign that something isn't right. The people in your community, especially your library patrons, go elsewhere to receive the things that they can and should be receiving from you. They may go to the town on down the road so that they can do interlibrary loan or borrow books when that's something they could do right at your library. A lot of times our community doesn't know about our hidden services, and we'll come back to that later. Staff may complain because they have too much to do in too little time. And this is what I find sets in for a while is that, you know, when you're in your second term as a board member, or you've been there for 5 years at the library, you may think you know everything, and everything starts to become boring. And that means it's time to start rethinking and shake things up. Okay, the strategic planning I'm going to talk about tonight is quite unlike anything you've ever read anywhere before. If you've been in a bigger organization and part of a strategic planning team, you may have done things in a very formalized manner. It may have taken quite a long time to go through the strategic planning process. This is very different. This is a simplified version that is applicable to all of the libraries in CKLS. One of the old things about strategic planning was that it would take you so long to go through the process that by the time you were able to start work, everything had changed up and you needed to start all over again. You didn't have time because it was taking so long as a formal process. Okay, so let's get started. In the strategic planning process, there are a number of questions you're going to need to ask yourself, library staff, and the community. Just to make it clear, one of the things that will be available to you after this webinar is this slideshow. It will be available on the CKLS website and you can download it. I've got a lot of references at the end and there are some links here so you can go through and follow things. When you ask about the community, there are very specific questions to ask. You may think you know your community, but I'll bet that there are some things that you don't know. And that's what we really want to dive into and find out. What's our population trend? Well, for most of us, except Salina and Hayes, we're decreasing in population. And this census will show us that. What is the average age and gender? What is the trend there? How do we fit in on income? As board members, one of your most important jobs is to represent the community. When you vote on items in a board meeting, you're voting your conscience, but you're also representing the rest of the community, especially the community who might not have a voice on the board. And that could very much include people of a lower income than yourself. What's the educational profile in our community? What's the health profile in our community? So let's go quick and do a field trip here to Great Bend. So I am going to census data, which is actually what CKLS uses to verify the money that you receive from us. And you can do this if you follow the link, or if you go to data.census.gov, you can find out what your community is. So can you see my mouse when I move it around?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Over here to the left, there's a menu. It's broken down by people and population, race and ethnicity, health, which is new actually, education, business and economy, employment, income and poverty. So when we look at Great Bend, we can see here going across, I'm going to make that a little bit, there we go. Going across here, we know what the population is, what the average household income is. The poverty rate at 20.4% is actually pretty indicative of rural Kansas. The employment rate, this is the employment, not unemployment rate, is pretty average for Kansas. So let's go in here. I'm going to go into race and ethnicity, which is interesting because when I first got to Great Bend about 13 years ago, I was surprised that we weren't offering services for our Spanish-speaking population. And people said, well, we hardly have anybody here. And what I discovered is that can't quite be true, because when I look at the list of high school graduates, a good third of the last names are Hispanic. But when you look at this, data.census.gov, you can see here that it doesn't show Hispanic. And the reason is because Hispanic falls here under white alone. So you'll have to do a little bit more digging if you think you may have a Hispanic population.
Miss Gail,
Yes.
I have a question from the chat.
Yes.
Is there different ways to strategic plan if you are a one-person library or a library with staff? I'm
going to give you the answer. And who was that from?
It came to me privately.
Oh, yeah, sure. You're going to get that answer. I want to look at health as well, because most of us with aging communities need to be mindful of the health of our community. Now, this is interesting because it reports different types of disabilities. On census data before, this information used to be difficult to find. So in Great Bend, 16% of our population is disabled. That is, we are a higher rate than the United States. Ambulatory difficulty is 9.3%. That's important to me because as the librarian at Great Bend, our library is not really handicap accessible. Sorry, there's my dog. I'm not sure what she's talking about, but that's life. Shh, go lay down. Our library isn't handicap accessible. So when we work on our strategic plan, that's something that we need to be very mindful of. 16% in our community are disabled. And so we know we can also look at people in population. And then that's going to give us age. The average age is 37, but 16% again, I'm moving my mouse too quickly and I'm sorry if I'm making anybody sick. It's one of the things that I always have to remind myself. 16% is over 65. And so when we add that number, that's 65 and older, and we use that with the people with ambulatory difficulties, that will make sense then why I make the building handicap accessible into our strategic plan starting last year, because we had to start the conversation, and moving forward for the next 5 years. It is the goal of me and my board that we make the building fully handicap accessible within the next 5 years. And so when we take this information along with some other things to our funders, and that could be grant opportunities or to our city, we've got some hard-hitting facts here that the city can't deny because it is the census information. And so when we talk to them about funding and about opportunities, then they know that we've done our homework. Remember, it's data.census.gov. You'll be surprised about what's going on in your community. You'll want to look at your veteran rate.
And I did put the link in the chat there for everybody. And it will be,
I have the chat minimized right now.
That's okay. And I wanted to just let everybody know that it will be in the archives that we send out as well. We'll make sure that link is there for you.
That's right. I always pick on Great Bend because it is my library and it's my town as well. And while we have work to do, I'm actually quite proud of the work that the staff has already done. So we've asked questions about the community. Now we need to ask a lot of questions about the library. And with that, as board members, oops, sorry. Oh, I never know how to go back. Sorry. Let's get here and let's start again. There we go. As board members, you may not know the answers to these questions, and trust me, your librarians might not as well, but this is the information that's going to really help inform your strategic planning. So what services do we offer now? And this is something for each board member to write down and for the librarian to offer now. What are our hidden services? This is a big one. These are the things that the library does that people can't see when they walk inside the library. Those include things like placing holds on materials at other libraries, borrowing things on interlibrary loan, faxes. Does the library send and receive faxes? Programs often aren't visible because if they're not happening when you walk into the library, your people might not know. There are a lot of different things that fall under hidden services. If you're having trouble brainstorming that, you give us a call at CKLS and we'll be glad to help you. A big question to ask is, have usage patterns changed? Are people still visiting the library? When are the busiest hours? What are they borrowing from the library? Are people coming to programs anymore? Do we have children in our library? That's going to give you a clue about how your strategic plan is going to evolve. We also need to ask about our collection, our books, large print, audiobooks, DVDs, our digital content. Do we have these? How old is our collection? By and large, that's going to be for your print material. If you still have VHS, that's going to really bring the age of your collection way up there, because that's an outmoded format. If you've got really old books, are they all still checking out? Statistically, probably not. And that might mean that it's time to weed the library, but then we might need to focus our attention on boosting up the collection. What is circulating in our library? What's the door count? How many people are coming into our library? Now, the easy way to determine that is not by having the librarian make tick marks on a calendar every day or each time someone comes into the library. This is where averages come in. And I'm no mathematician, but this is our friend here. Take the door count during a week that's busy, usually in summer, not this year, and a week when it's not so busy, and average those together, and that works. Is our building in good shape? How's our roof? Has anybody been up there to see if there's hail damage? Do we consider ourselves handicap accessible? You may have a building that's handicap accessible, but there's a little lip from the sidewalk to the door that makes it very difficult if you have a walker or a wheelchair to get into the library. Do we have enough employees? Do we pay our employees well? And how do we compare with other Kansas libraries our size?
And I thought I saw a hand in Osborne, but I don't know if you were just stretching, because all I can see is the roof or the ceiling there. So
Sure.
Osborne, did you have a question?
Just call them out. In order to compare yourselves with other Kansas libraries your size, there are a couple of different ways that you can do this. You can request our help. You would contact Mary Beth and she'll make you a beautiful spreadsheet. Or you can do it yourself if you go look at the annual state survey, which each library fills out in January. You're not going to compare Lebanon to Salina. You want to compare it with a library in a community your size.
And if you need help with that, I'm happy to find some comparisons for you.
Right.
Libraries that are similar within CKLS and then throughout the state as well. And there is a question about the library building. Does the library ask these building questions if the building is owned by the city?
Yes. Yes, you should, because you're the ones who live in it. The city may not come and inspect it on a regular basis. The city may very well assume that that's something that you're doing. Now, what you may want to do, and CKLS has a list to help you inspect the building to find out if everything is running well, is you may want to have the city maintenance guys or gals come out and do the inspection, but they want to share that with you, with those results as well. Yes, you should be part of that with them. Now, as trustees, there are a couple of documents that you should have in your toolkit and pretty much refer to on a regular basis. One is the CKLS Trustee Resource Guide. Another is the Kansas Public Library Trustee Handbook. And a third is the Kansas Public Library Standards. Right now, the most recent published version is from 2016. A current version is getting ready to be published. When that has been approved, we will make copies and send them out to all of you at your request. The Kansas Public Library standards can really help you guide your library into the future in a couple of different ways. The standards ask a bunch of questions to see if you're doing what you need to be doing as a library and as a board, but it also asks things in these specific areas: structure and governance, community engagement, funding, services and resources, technology, personnel, and physical facility. We're going to spend some time on these. I was thinking about this when I was preparing this presentation. I was customizing it for you all. And one of the things I realized is that the questions that we at CKLS receive nearly always fall into one of these categories. And I thought that you could definitely take these categories and use them to help you guide yourselves during your strategic planning process. And so that's what we're going to look at right now. And remember, anytime you've got a question, just be sure and ask. Okay, so what I'm suggesting you do is you look at the Kansas Public Library standards. I want you to read through the standard, and I'm using my hands to talk, and I know you can't see me. I want you to read through the standard, take notes because that's your document. And then as a board, you're going to decide which one standard you want to work on. You're going to pick one standard and narrow it down. And so in this instance, I'm using my library as an example. We've selected physical facility. Our library was built in the 70s. It's a fortress, truly, except it was built in the 70s and it needs upgrading. And so we decided that handicap accessibility is what we want to work on. We know that our automatic doors, we do have handicap open doors to the main entrance only. Those doors are original to the building. The hinges have been replaced. It requires constant tinkering and hefting and shimming to make the doors work right. The doors are not synced, they're not synchronized, and so there's always a huge cold draft coming in the winter and a blast of hot air in the summer. Our restrooms, our only handicap accessible restrooms are down in the basement, and those have very, very heavy doors. Those doors are not handicap accessible, no button. Also, they do not have handicap cabinets there. The entrance ramp is very steep. I don't know that we can change the level or grade of that, but we could put a handrail down the middle. And so these are the big things that we see. We know that we're going to need funding for each one of those components. That means that we're probably going to have to write multiple grants. Who is going to do all of the work? And that means not just the work to install the new doors and things like that. Who's going to write the grants? Who's going to keep us on track? If you need a new roof or a new HVAC system, these are the same kinds of things that you'll be talking yourself through. How are we going to pay for this? How long will what we have now last? So let's pick one and narrow it down again. Let's talk about structure and governance. And this is a question that we get asked every time we do trustee training. How do we get board members? Often the question is, we're so small, we can't get board members. So I've rolled those into one question here. And there are a number of things that you can do. The first thing that a library board can do is they can pass a charter ordinance, which expands the boundaries of the library, but only for the purpose of attracting board members or recruiting board members. One thing very important to remember in this charter ordinance is that does not expand your taxing district. So anybody who comes to the board outside of the town boundaries does not pay taxes to your library. When you do a charter ordinance like this, and again, CKLS has examples we can send you. You want to make sure that you put wording in there to limit the number of people on the board who do not live right within the town boundaries. The reason for this is because they don't pay taxes. We want our taxpayers to have full representation. How do we recruit trustees? What does that process look like? Do we as board members pick our replacements? Or do we go and visit with someone and say, hey, we want you to come on the board, come on and we will appoint you and you'll be a board member? Well, that is not what trustee recruitment is. And Kansas state laws actually speak to library trustees and new board members. As the board, you certainly can share information with eligible and interested parties. You can also say to someone, hey, I think that you would make a good library trustee. Here's what we do. And so we go on to the next step. You need a good job description for a trustee. If they are told that all you need to do is attend a meeting once a month, you're really steering them down the wrong path. I believe that library trustees, library board members, same thing, are some of the most important volunteers in the community. I just referred to Kansas state law. Most of the volunteers in your community are not going to be governed by Kansas state law. Library trustees are. CKLS has a job description for library trustees. We also have a quiz to let you know, as a board, are you doing a good job? How are you going to advertise and market that you've got open positions for trustees? You'll need to visit with the mayor and let the mayor know what kind of trustees you're looking for the board. You're not going to mention specific names, but you might say, you know, we've got 3 school teachers. We could really use a business person, and we've got a project coming on where we're really going to be working on the building. If you can find someone who has a background in construction, that would be ideal for us.
Why
yes.
does the mayor care?
Oh, why does the mayor care? Well, I'll hear from most boards that the mayor doesn't care. The mayor doesn't come to meetings, but the mayor may not know that the mayor is a voting member of the board, and that it is one of the responsibilities by Kansas statutes, again, that the mayor appoint all board members to public libraries, and then the trustees or board members are approved by city council. The mayor actually plays a very important role in crafting the library board, whether they know it or not. And what I find is that most mayors don't know that because they don't teach that in mayor school. But once they find out, and once they understand that there are statutes that say that they need to be doing these, they get right in line and they do what they need to do. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Gail.
Mm-hmm. If you want to attract board members and you want them to do a good job on the board, you need to make sure that you have current and thorough bylaws and policies. If you hand a new board member, as part of their orientation, a set of bylaws that does not cover what it should cover, they're going to get the wrong idea about the library. And over time, as board members' terms expire, it could be that board members aren't really running the library or running the library board the way that they're supposed to be doing. And when I say the way that they're supposed to be doing, I'll refer back again to those Kansas laws. We're not the library police. We are always your library friend. But one of the things we want to do is make sure that you're running your board and your library the way that you should in compliance with the law. The reason that you want to have current policies is so that your library staff know how to run the library on the day-to-day. So bylaws tell the library board what to do. And policies tell the library staff and library patrons what to do or not to do. The best policies are written with the librarian because they know the nitty-gritty, and the board working together. If you think that your bylaws might not be up to snuff or your policies might not be all that, you contact Mary Beth or contact me, and we will give you a policy and a bylaw audit, and we will make suggestions as to how you can improve those or to bring those more in alignment with Kansas law. It's something that we actually enjoy doing, and it helps us get smarter.
And an audit may be a scary word, but don't be scared of us. We're going to make suggestions, and we're going to be clear about our suggestions, but it's to help, it's not to judge.
Exactly. And if you need us to sit down at a meeting, either face-to-face or online with your board and go over our suggestions, you can do that. You're not, except in instances where the old policies and bylaws may be saying something that is contrary to the law, you are in charge of what the bylaws and policies say. Every new trustee should get a good orientation, and we've got a list again of what that should contain, but they should know what they're getting in for. One of the other ways to attract new board members is to run a tight board meeting. Set an agenda, keep the agenda, use Robert's rules for small boards. A well-run library board meeting should last about an hour. Sometimes they're going to last a little longer, sometimes not. So if your goal is to attract board members, you can see why I say pick one thing, because you've got a lot of work to do to make sure that that happens, to get to that process. This is not all going to happen in one board meeting. This looks like it's about a year's worth of work here. So let's talk about community engagement, because another question we get is, how do we get more people to visit the library? Or how do we get more people to engage with us in our social media? You've got to ask questions again. What does our door count tell us? How many people come in and out? We might want to go into when do people come out? Days, when do people come to visit? Days and time range. Does the community know that the library offers more than books? Or does the library just offer books? How does the library market services to the community? What kind of programming do you have available? Is there money set aside for programming? If you are a programming library and you still want to get more people to visit the library, do the programs that you're offering match the demographics of the community? And this is where we can go all the way back to the census website that I took you to. Oops, I see a typo. Is the library an exciting place to visit? When was the last time you rearranged the furniture? When was the last time the walls were painted? Are there good signs to point people to where they need to be? People seek information out now in very different ways than they did probably when your library building was built.
Another thing to ask yourself is, when you first step in the library doors, is it a welcoming entrance? And sometimes it's hard to do that when you enter those doors every day. But if you can get somebody to come in and kind of just, how do I feel when I come in these doors? Do I feel welcome? Does it a warm and friendly place?
Is there a smiling face? One of the things that I find helps is to take pictures. Are there displays? Are the displays changed on a regular basis? If your community walks in and sees the display for new books, but there are still books from 6 months ago on the display, they're not going to look there again because they're not going to think that's what really is a new book. Is the library doing outreach? Are you going out into the community to do things? And does the library have a mission and a vision statement? And does that mission and vision statement speak to getting more people into the library? Or does it speak to serving the entire community? Often what we see, as Mary Beth said, is we get used to seeing the same things when we enter the library. Well, when you're in the library, you get used to seeing the same faces who borrow the same kinds of books. The same families come to story time until they age out. And so you tell yourself, oh, I know my community. I know what my community wants to read. When the reality is that you know what you see on a regular basis and what you've grown accustomed to. There's a lot, even in a small town, there's a lot that you don't know.
Bill,
Yes.
how might we get the users that are not finding our library?
We're going to have to do a little bit of work to reach out to them. They might not go to the same church that we do, and they might not work in the same places. They might work out of town. Their children might, if they're young, they might go to daycare outside of town. So we're going to really need to figure out a way to attract those people. This is, especially if they're young, this is where social media can really come into play. Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok. I mean, there's so many choices now. I'm not recommending that you do all of them, but you're going to have to find out where they are. If they work out of town and don't get home until 7 o'clock at night, is the library open for them when they get home? Or is the library open on the weekend? These are questions as a board you're going to need to ask yourself. How can we reach out to them? How can we touch them and find them? It
And
may
Gail,
be sending out a mailer. Yes?
I have another question about outreach. How does the library handle outreach when the library board does not have the funds to pay staff outside of regular library hours?
Oh, okay. So this is where something handy dandy like a volunteer would make it all so simple and easy, but often that's not the reality. What you're going to need to do if outreach is one of your priorities in strategic planning is you're going to need to realign some things. You're going to need to realign the actual hours, the building is open, and the librarian or library staff are in the building. If you find that no one is coming to story time because they're all in daycare, and you've got more than one daycare or even just one daycare in your community, story time needs to go to them. Remember, board members, that your library staff do not volunteer for any work. They cannot volunteer to go do a story time at the daycare outside of their normal working hours. So what you would do is you would say, instead of opening the library at 10 in the morning on Wednesday, you would open the library at 11:30 on Wednesday. That gives the librarian plenty of time to pack up the books in the car, go to do a story time, come back and recover from that. And by recover, I mean she's going to need to check in the books that she brought back with her and get ready to open the day. That is perfectly fine. Once upon a time, many years ago, CKLS required the library to be open a certain number of hours, and some of those hours had to be evening and weekend hours. We do not require that anymore. We know and we trust that the local library board will know what is best for their community. So if it is best for your community to close the library for an hour and a half every Wednesday so the librarian can go out of the building and do actual library work, if the board makes that decision, I'm going to applaud you because you are serving your community where they need to be served. Now, does that make sense?
I'm seeing people nodding their heads, yes.
Good, exactly. That's a pretty scary thing. Because how do we know if our librarian is doing a good job when they're out there? And as board members, this is one of the things you're going to want to do. Remember, you're the boss of the librarian. Not any one of you, but all of you together. You may want to pop in and see how that librarian is doing on outreach. Or is the librarian really taking that hour and a half and coming into work late? As the board, it is your responsibility to make sure that the outreach would be happening. Hopefully you have a good relationship with your librarian and you know that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. So this is a very, very popular topic. We need more money. You can see why when we talk about budget and finance, you really need to narrow it down, because look at all those questions you're going to have to ask yourself. And these are questions when I have a board or a librarian who says, we need more money. How do we get more money? These are questions that I have you work through. The first thing that I'm going to have you do is send me a copy of your budget with actual expenditures, because I'm going to look and see, is there anything that you are spending money on that you no longer need to? One of those would be memberships into the Kansas Library Association Trustee Association. That is not required. If I look at your demographics and you have a lot of children, like 60% children and 30% adult, but your budget is skewed so that 90% of your materials budget is being spent on adults and only 10 is being spent on children, I'm going to point that out. We want to make sure that the budget is aligned to the community, not to what we've always done, or to the loudest voices in the community, because children often do not have a voice, and grown-ups and senior citizens can be very loud. So is there anything we can cut back on?
And there's also some CKLS services can take the place of what you might be doing in-house, and that would save you some staff time, but also save you some money as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. CKLS is almost all entirely hidden services. And we offer things that librarians who've been here for 10 years are just like, oh my gosh, I never knew you offered that. It's just how it is. What do we no longer have to do? What can we outsource to CKLS or elsewhere? What is our mill levy? When was the last time the mill levy changed? Do we have a mill levy cap in our community? What is the property valuation? Is it going up or down? Does the city offer anything in kind? If your city guys, if you say, no, the city doesn't offer us anything in kind, but the city guys come and change light bulbs whenever you need them to, you need to reconsider that, because we should bill that out at about 20 bucks an hour. As a board, are you and is your library staff doing everything they can to earn the maximum dollars from CKLS? We have, it's not so much anymore, but it's still a big enough sum that I'm going to mention is we have libraries who leave money on the table every year. They don't earn that money, and so they don't get it. How do we show our value to the city and taxpayers? In Great Bend, we have a rec center, and we have the library, and we have other city sorts of organizations. The rec center's job is to make money. Libraries don't make money. Libraries are really good at spending money. And so if we're not showing our actual value to the city elected officials, the stakeholders, council members, and our taxpayers, they're not going to understand what we do. There are a lot of really, really cool value calculators where you can say a book is worth $25. Our community checked out this many books, and here's how much it cost each taxpayer. In many communities, they pay taxes to the library in the amount of 1 or 2 books a year. Here's how much we actually saved our taxpayers. And I think that those are very important tools to have handy. Do your city council members know that frequently the library receives more visits than all the ball fields in town? That's the case in Great Bend, and they just spent millions of dollars on a whole new ball field. And they were shocked when they found out that the library receives more visits in a month than the ball fields do in an entire year. They need to know these things. They need to know that the board is required to attend continuing education, and the librarian is as well. most often, and I don't mean to put city council members down, they're wonderful, wonderful people, but they're pulled in a lot of different directions. Most often when they think about the library, they think about a lady my age with her hair in a bun, shushing you because you're making too much noise in the library. When you talk about story time numbers with them, what they think is story time is a little kid sitting on a grandma's lap and she reads them a story. They don't know that it is early childhood literacy skills. They don't know that their librarian has training to be able to offer those skills to your community young folk. So talking about the value to the city and the taxpayers is one of the most important steps in this list of things when we talk about we need more money. Because before you can ask for more money, then you need to build a relationship with them. You need to sustain that relationship, and they need to know your value. Does anyone from the library regularly attend city council meetings? They need to see a face, and they need to see it frequently to build that personal relationship. It doesn't always need to be anyone. If the board requires the librarian to attend city council meetings every month or every week, sorry, we'll just go with month, the board needs to pay the librarian to attend. Does the library seek out grant opportunities? One of the things that we've been looking at is what percentage of a library budget is funded locally and what percentage of the library budget is funded by CKLS. And in our smaller communities, that local community is receiving more, that library, I'm sorry, is receiving more money from CKLS than it is from the local community. So when one of those smaller libraries says, we need more money, we want more money from CKLS, we're going to be pointing them towards grant opportunities because they're already getting more money than is provided locally.
Gail, I have a couple questions in the chat.
Yes.
Is there a checklist or cheat sheet for city offer in kind, for things that the city might offer in kind for the library? I don't think we have one, but we could come up with one.
Right, not yet, but we could sure make one. And it would be a living document and we would keep adding to it.
Okay, and the other one is who in the library is told what our library left on the table from CKLS? And in February and March, in February and March, after the CKLS system grant questionnaire is finished in January, I send out a letter to each library telling them how much money was earned and what standards were missed, if any. So that goes to the library. So most likely your librarian has it if they're the ones that answer the mail.
And your librarian should be sharing that with you as a board. One of the things that I know about library boards is you can only make good decisions if you are receiving the information that you need. And that is a critical part of the information you need.
Yes, and then if the librarian attends city meetings voluntarily as a citizen, then they do not need to pay them, correct?
Correct, but they cannot talk about library.
When you talk about library, then you're working.
Right.
And that's federal labor laws. You can, as an employee, you cannot volunteer your time at your place of work.
Right, that's right, that's right.
So the same goes for a librarian attending a library board meeting. They must be paid as well.
They must be paid. Now, this is where there are a couple of things I want to talk about what Patty just talked about. This is why generally if you have many people or even several people on your library staff, only the library director attends the board meeting. It is going to blow anybody's budget. I don't care if you're Randall, Kansas with 80 people in town or Salina with many more than that. You cannot afford to be paying all of your library staff to attend a board meeting. That is the responsibility of the library director. The library director serves as a technical advisor to the board during that meeting. The library director takes notes, and the library director brings the information back to the other staff members. Okay, so if we've addressed the public library standards and we've decided on one broad area, say structure and governance or budget and finance, whichever one it's going to be, you in your mind right now are running through ideas of what we need to focus on. So you'll know what you're gonna bring to the board and say, hey, I'd like to see us focus on that. And you'll share with the board why, and the board may approve it. Well, what do we do then? So when we get started, we need to know who's in charge of this project. Most often, I see library boards put the librarian in charge of the project. Now, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. Sometimes the librarian is the best person to be in charge of the project. However, most of the librarians in CKLS do not work 40 hours a week. Over half of them work less than 15 hours a week. During that 15 hours, they are running the business of the library, checking things in and out, cleaning, doing all the necessary paperwork, and the paperwork is the same even if you're a small library or a big library. They're probably having story time, or now they're scrambling to try to find a way to have summer library program and story time online. And they're probably doing some book delivery right now too. Do they really have time in their 15 hours a week to manage a big project? You need to ask yourselves honestly as a board, and I think you're going to find out that the answer is most likely no. The board president should probably not be in charge of the project. The treasurer should probably not be in charge of the project. And the reason that I say that is because as a treasurer, you've got some pretty big responsibility. That's the reason nobody ever wants to be the treasurer. You've got a lot of work to do there, reconciling the books, writing the checks, bringing them to the board meeting so the president and the secretary can sign them and get those bills paid. The president runs the board meeting. They set the agenda with the librarian. So who is going to be in charge? We can apply principles of project management to make sure that things get done. So what you can do then is you can break a project down into different task areas and then assign those tasks out to different people. Sometimes you may want to establish a committee of 3 people or 2 people to work on one of the tasks. MFK Fisher was a writer, and she's the one who said that anybody can eat an elephant 1 bite at a time. And that's how you're going to approach project management, and that's how you're going to approach these individual tasks within strategic planning. You need to address timeframes. When is the project going to start? And most importantly is, when should we wrap this up? If you don't give yourself an end date or a range for an end date, it will drag on forever. People won't get things done in a timely fashion because they think they have all the time in the world. If you've ever prepared a Thanksgiving or a holiday meal, you know you have to work backwards. If we want dinner on the table at 5, what time does the bird have to go in the oven? You've got to work backwards. And it's the same with these big projects. I'm not going to recommend that you do fancy things like Gantt charts, and anybody my age is going to know what those are, or that you're going to use a nifty app like Trello or anything like that. I'm just going to give you some ways to make sure this happens. Communication is the most important thing in any project, and especially with strategic planning. The library board should not really undertake strategic planning unless you have a good flow of communication with each other and with the librarian. When I say a good communication flow with each other, I'm talking about exclusively within a board meeting. Kansas Open Meetings Act states very clearly that if 3 of you are together and you start talking about library business, you shouldn't be doing that. You're coming darn close to holding a serial meeting if 3 of you or 4 of you are talking about things through email chat. You've got to be really careful of that. So if you're in a board meeting, what is the body language around you? Are people checking their phone under the table, scrolling through to find out how the Royals are doing? Or next month, hopefully the Chiefs? Or are they engaged and paying attention to what's going on in the meeting? Having projects like this actually is one of the best ways to get your board engaged. You want to make sure you've got that good communication flow with the librarian. If you direct the librarian to do something, is it a realistic expectation? And your librarian should be very comfortable saying, I'm not going to be able to get this done and ready for you by the time you want it because I've got X, X, and X. I'm going to need some help with this. Or what do you want me to stop doing so that I can make sure this gets done? Librarians have a tendency to martyr themselves, and you have to watch out for that as a board. You don't want that to happen to your librarian. They will burn out and they will be done. Review is an important process in project management. When will you regularly meet to revisit how we're doing? This can be part of your regular board meeting. You can schedule this in under ongoing business. You can talk about strategic planning that way on your library agenda, or you can add it as a point of new business. But people need to be held accountable, and everybody needs to understand what's going on with the tasks and where we are in them, even if they weren't assigned that task or they're not part of that committee. That committee needs to spend a few moments and report back to everyone else. Especially in this day and age, excuse me, where 1 minute, say Tuesday, the person is planning to come to the meeting. Wednesday, their throat's a little sore, and Thursday, they have to go and get a COVID test. Unfortunately, that is getting to be more the norm. And so keeping that communication open is critical. And the last part of project management is success. How will we determine our overall success? Is it going to be just as simple as the project is complete? You know, so for us in Great Bend, where we're working on that handicap accessibility, all the moving parts are in place is going to show us that we were a success at this. That we'll be able to take photographs of people using the equipment, and we can let our community know. That may be a way to mark that success, but for us, it will be that everything's in place. Any questions? Okay, so you've asked lots and lots of questions and you've got the answers. You have looked at the Kansas Public Library standards and you have narrowed down your one thing, and you have made a list of action steps that need to happen. You have figured out who is going to do what. You've figured out how you're going to communicate and when. You've established a realistic timeline on things, and you know when your end date is. So you think you're ready to go. So I'm actually talking very quickly tonight. I'm going to share with you some simple and free tools, and they don't cost you a thing. You're going to need to clarify those action steps. You're going to have to do first things first. You're going to start small. Unless your project is, we want a new building, that's a big project. You're going to be taking baby steps. You're going to be making progress and changes without going crazy. You're going to stay on track. Because you've set a realistic timeline, you should be able to meet deadlines. Now, what I can't promise you is that if you've got a building project that your contractors are going to get their bids in on time, that there is always a monkey wrench thrown into things when you bring more people in on a project. You're going to achieve results and you're going to finish strong.
Gail?
Yes.
Should you have a program evaluation at the end of the process or project?
I'm not sure what's meant by a program evaluation. Should you, so I'm going to guess, and you'll have to clarify for me, please, is are we evaluating the process that we went through and how successful we were with each action step, or are we evaluating the results? If you can take a moment to answer that, that will help me.
Process and end results.
Oh, so both. Okay. Yes, you should. And that is part of your finishing strong. You've achieved the results, and so you want to finish strong. So what you will do is you will take some time at a board meeting, and each person involved in the project will then report back about how they felt the process went. Were we able to meet deadlines? Did people do what they were supposed to do? Mary Beth, if you'll bring me back to a strong board president in just a moment, I don't want to forget that. Did people do what they were supposed to do? And when I say supposed to, is that sometimes if you've got a project going on, you can't ask for volunteers. You have to assign people. This is human nature here, and it's basic psychology. Board members should expect to do anywhere from 1 to 2 hours of work a month outside of the board meeting. And when you have that board recruitment and you're getting new trustees and the orientation and things, that's something that should be very clear to them. You don't just show up for a 1-hour meeting. So you're gonna look at every action step and not just the individuals who were involved, and you're gonna see, was this successful? When we talk about the free and simple tools, I'm gonna give you some ideas on how to ensure that that process is successful. In order to evaluate the end result, you have to be very clear from the onset about what you want. If we go back to my handicap accessibility example, and it's great because it's real. We're not imagining things with this. We know exactly what it is we need to do to make that building handicap accessible. We know how many automatic doors we have to install. We know everything. We know that we have to have automatic lights because our light switches are up too high and the walls are tiled, or we're going to have to take out some tile and relocate those light switches. But I know there's asbestos in the building, so there's one of those things. We know every step that needs to be addressed. And so the end result is, did those things happen, or were we able to do those things? In our instance, we might not be able to get grants for every single one of those projects. And so we have to allot local tax dollars given to the library for those projects if we want it to be a complete success. If one of your goals in strategic planning is to, we need more money, and there is a mill cap right now on your library, you know you will have been successful if the mill cap has been raised or removed entirely. You know you'll be successful if you are writing grants and getting them, and that includes even grants from CKLS. You'll know you're successful when more money is coming in. If your
Gail,
goal, yes?
You wanted to go back to a strong board president, and then we have a couple more questions.
Awesome.
And then we are just past the hour mark.
Oh, you know what? I'm looking at the wrong clock. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not talking fast enough. Here we go. I would caution you, there is one thing to bear in mind through this whole process, and a strong board president is a wonderful thing. However, As the board chair, it is not your responsibility to do every single thing. You do not say, well, I'll do it, or worse, if nobody else is going to do it, I'll do it. The reason for that is because when it comes time to elect officers again, nobody's going to want to be the president because they think you have to do all of this other stuff. Okay, I'm going to race through this and then we'll have time for some questions. So there is the free and simple tools are very old and very effective. After World War II, a group of American businessmen went to Japan and did some work there. They developed this thing called Kaizen and Kanban, and that's what I'm going to talk to you about. You don't need to know how to say it, you just need to know what it is. As a result, these tools helped modernize Japanese industry, and it really helped it become the powerhouse that it is now. And so Kai is change and Zen is for the better. And so Kaizen is continuous improvement. What it helps you do is it helps you prioritize and put into action those steps in your plan. And it shows you how to work through those changes or those steps in small daily bites. Remember, anybody can eat an elephant one bite at a time. So you're going to think big and start small. Just as when we look at the standard, then we narrow it down to the one thing that we want to do, because even the smallest things have lots of little steps that need to be taken. You can complete big things in small steps over time. It works because all of us are able to do a small thing. It gives you confidence, and it really helps you motivate everyone involved in the project and stay the course through the strategic planning process. So I'm going to scoot through this really quickly. Kaizen has a number of different sections. You're going to use statistics, not emotions. You want your library to be what you want it to be. You have to set some things in order before that can happen. You're going to look for opportunities to improve. And before you do anything, before you add one more thing, you're going to make sure it's aligned with the goals that you have for the library. You're going to standardize expectations, and that way everyone knows that we're going to be doing this in baby steps. You never want to make changes faster than your staff can keep up. This is important, and this is how will we know we're a success through the process, is that with Shitsuku, everyone will be held accountable to their action steps and their goals. This is also where you do that evaluation and say, how did we do? What's next for us? So Kanban is the tool. Kanban is a visual tool. It can be as simple as a big piece of poster board with 2 vertical lines drawn on it. But most of us as humans freeze when we think about where are we going to start when it's a huge project. If we know where to begin, we feel less overwhelmed. Kanban helps you eat that elephant one bite at a time. Kanban encourages small change that sticks. Kanban helps everyone communicate through the process, and everyone knows where we are. A Kanban helps people work slowly to make it happen. Limit works in progress. You should only be working on one thing at a time. Multitasking is a lie, people. We do less at a time, and we do them more efficiently when we limit works in progress. Okay, so this is what a Kanban looks like. You've got 2 vertical lines there on the far left. Those are Post-it notes with everything that needs to be done. So if you were talking about one of those goals for strategic planning, it would be all the action steps. In the middle, it's what we're doing. And notice there are never more than 3 items there. And then when it's done, it moves over to the right. So anybody can walk into the library at any time and see what needs to be done, what is in progress, and who is doing it, and what we have accomplished. I think you'll be very surprised, because people will say, when they see what's on the to-do column, they'll say, oh, I could do that. And they'll take ownership of it. write their name on it, and put it in the doing column and move it to the done column when they're done. So Hoshin Kanri is a Japanese term, and this is what I want your strategic planning process to be. I want the library board to be the ship in a storm going the right direction. Okay, and then the lots and lots of things for you to look at there. Okay, let's hit those questions. I can see you all again. Oh my goodness, look at that time.
Let me scroll up and let me see if I can find it here. Okay. So we had Melissa ask, I'm blurry. We had Melissa ask if a staff member could attend a board meeting as a citizen.
No.
Okay.
No, because inevitably somebody's going to say, what do you think about that? Or they're going to say what they think about it. And that's library work.
So it's just because even if you plan not to say anything and just go as a concerned citizen.
It's not a good idea.
It's too tempting to jump in with your.
Well, it's like being on an airplane and anybody says, is there a doctor on the plane? It's the same.
Is there a librarian in the house?
Is there a librarian on the plane? Yeah.
Okay. Can you give a specific example of a small project, a medium project, and a big project? And we had some chatters give some examples.
Mm-hmm.
Small would be paper plane passive program, and a big project would be weeding. So what would be a medium project?
Okay, so I would consider weeding a medium project, and it is an ongoing project. I would consider a big project getting the mill cap raised, or new roof on the building, things that cost, if you look at things in terms of dollars, things that cost big money, a new roof, a new building, all new computers on a regular basis. Those would be big things. Sometimes hiring a librarian is a big project. And I'm looking at you, you know it. A small project could definitely be, even, it depends on the size of your library, weeding the library. But if you want to weed enough to be able to remove some of the shelves to create more floor space, that then becomes a much bigger project. And if you're in Salina, you have a goal about why you need that floor space, then it becomes part of the bigger picture. It's an action step for a much larger goal.
Weeding, if you start from a spot where it hasn't been done in a long time, then it's a big project. It really does depend on how much weeding you've done before.
Right, and you could have been weeding the library, but you've never analyzed the collection. I did earlier this year a webinar for librarians on how to analyze your collection and know, are we buying what we need to be buying? Statistics will show you.
So Gail, I may have not followed the journey tonight. I'm a little distracted. It was a long Monday for me. So so the project that we choose may be initiated by the librarian, or it may be initiated by the board, or through a series of conversations. One or the other is not the correct answer, though.
Correct, and it may even be something that a community member brings up. One or the other points of initiation are not exclusively right or wrong. The way to proceed, though, is with a quorum of the board saying, this is what we need to do. This is how we need to move forward. And they're saying that not from their own personal chair, but in the chair they sit in when they represent the community.
Thank you. All right, one last question, and I think then we should probably close the meeting. Would you gather stats from the community about the changes to help promote future projects as a sort of proof that you know what your community needs?
Absolutely. How you go about doing that is going to be different based on your community. You can throw thousands of dollars at this and to ask your community's opinion on things. Most of us are not likely to do that. And luckily, most of us have library board, library patrons and community members who are very, very glad to share their opinion on any number of things with us. But yes, you would want to find out if what you have in mind is aligned with the community. I am really sorry. I was looking at a very different clock, and I kept thinking it's showing me that it's 20 after, and I thought, well,
You were in mountain time.
I was in mountain time. I apologize for keeping you here this long. You, goodness, 15 minutes already. If you have questions that I did not cover or was not able to answer, or just questions, please feel free to email me or call me. I work equally for library board members as I do for librarians. And I'm a little bit passionate about this. You might have caught on to that. And I will be very glad to visit with your board about this process. Or even if you need somebody to say, hey, this is what we have in mind, is this realistic? I'll be glad to help you with that.
One last comment in the chat is that Amy from Otis did a patron survey through a mailing with the city bill, and then they got responses back through there. So that's partnership right there. See if there's something you can send out with the city bill, water, whatever, that really helps. I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. It is recorded. I will send out the link probably tomorrow, or basically by the end of the week for sure. And we'll make sure that this is archived. We'll have the handy links in there with the slideshow, so you have access to everything. Any questions, send them to us. Patty put our emails there in the link. And have a good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, and if you'd like me to throw